Why are so many people being diagnosed with cancer? Everyone seems to be getting cancer these days, will be kind of the first question. Why can't we find a cure for cancer? Why is it so hard to find a cure? Worryingly or depressingly for someone who works in the industry will be is farmers keeping back the cure for cancer.
When we think about cancer, we often think about the science, the technology, and the breakthroughs that make the headlines. But behind every discovery, behind every treatment, there are people who dedicate their careers to asking difficult questions, to challenging conventions, and to pushing the boundaries of what's possible in medicine.
And I think we're getting better at predicting how in vitro and in vivo experiments could potentially translate into the clinic. But there's still a big gap. And so what we're trying to do really is to utilize other translational models to help improve the probability of making it from the bench to the market.
My guest today has spent his entire career at the heart of this mission, from R&D to commercial strategy, from consulting to leadership roles. Today, he serves as Executive Director and Early Development Leader in Oncology at GSK, where he continues to shape the future of how cancer is understood, treated, and ultimately lived with. Precision medicine, AI, and real-world evidence are redefining what's possible for cancer patients. Where do you see the greatest opportunities for these tools to actually move the needle on outcomes?
It's difficult to see where it's going to go. I mean, I think it could go in many, many directions, and that's exciting. We're starting to pick power of some of these tools, utilizing in drug discovery to understand novel targets, to almost virtually develop molecules.
In this conversation, we are not going to talk about molecules or lab results. Instead, we are going to explore the big picture, how oncology treatment has evolved, the opportunities and barriers that still remain, and the leadership lessons. This is a story about perseverance, about vision, and about what it means to dedicate your life to fighting one of humanity's greatest challenges. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Sav Solanki. Sav, welcome to Drug Diaries. Before we jump into today's episode, I just want to say something from the heart. Over 93% of the people who watch this podcast regularly haven't subscribed. And listen, I get it. Life is busy. You click, you watch, you move on. But if you've ever felt like this show brings you value, if it has made you think, sparked a new idea, introduced you to something inspiring, then I have a small favor to ask. Please hit that subscribe button. It might not seem like much, but to me, it means everything. This podcast has always been a labor of love. No sponsors, no script, just honest conversations with people trying to make a difference in the world of healthcare. And your support, your one click, helps me keep doing that. It helps more people discover these voices. It helps this community grow. So if you're here, if you believe in this, please consider subscribing. Thank you for being here. Now let's get into the episode. When we think about cancer, we often think about the science, the technology, and the breakthroughs that make the headlines. But behind every discovery, behind every treatment, there are people who dedicate their careers to asking difficult questions, to challenging conventions, and to pushing the boundaries of what's possible in medicine. My guest today has spent his entire career at the heart of this mission. Dr. Sav Solanki has worked across the full spectrum of oncology, from R&D to commercial strategy, from consulting to leadership roles. Today, he serves as Executive Director and Early Development Leader in Oncology at GSK, where he continues to shape the future of how cancer is understood, treated, and ultimately lived with. In this conversation, we are not going to talk about molecules or lab results. Instead, we are going to explore the big picture, how oncology treatment has evolved, the opportunities and barriers that still remain, and the leadership lessons Sav has learned on his journey. We'll discuss what it really takes to build a career in one of the toughest but most impactful areas of healthcare, and what the future might look like for patients, doctors, and innovators around the world. This is a story about perseverance, about vision, and about what it means to dedicate your life to fighting one of humanity's greatest challenges. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Sav Solanki. Sav, welcome to Drug Diaries.
Thank you very much, Kaushik. Very pleasure to be here.
Likewise, it's an honor and a privilege to have you on Drug Diaries today. So, Sav, to begin with, may I request you to please introduce yourself to our audience?
Thank you so much, Kaushik, for the kind introduction. So I'm Sav, based here in the UK, not far from London, a town called High Wycombe. I'm very excited to be part of this show. My current role, as you mentioned, I'm working in R&D, and I'm very excited to have made that move after many years on the commercial side. So So excited to see things from both directions, and hopefully we can have a conversation about that today.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting switch from commercial to R&D. And how you're liking this new role?
It's been very interesting, and whenever you join a new function or a new role, you have a perception, but until you've actually lived the role for a few months, it's quite hard to kind of predict how it's going to be. But I'm very happy to say it's met my expectations or exceeded my expectations so far. So really excited to be working on some really novel early stage assets, working with a very high performing R&D team, and being at that cutting edge of science, which is what I really wanted to do, having made the move back from commercial.
And Sav, you have dedicated your entire career to oncology, and most people in the industry don't choose oncology lightly. It's an area that requires vision and a deep sense of purpose. Cancer is still the second leading cause of death globally, with nearly 10 million lives lost every year. And yet, it's also a field where hope, progress, and breakthroughs are reshaping lives every single day. So, Sav, take us back to the beginning. What was it that made you choose this path? And what was the driving force behind that decision?
Good question, Kaushik. And not a quick answer for you. I think it was something that I probably landed into more than kind of was planning, I'd say. So I did the usual kind of scientific start. I did a degree, undergraduate degree in chemistry at Imperial College London. That degree did have a year in industry built in, so I spent a year at Pfizer working in drug development, which is really eye opening. And actually, one of the things I did at Pfizer when I was there was network. And I was very young there. I didn't really know what I was doing, but somehow kind of had an ingrained kind of sense that I need to speak to people in these organizations and understanding how they've got to where they've got to, and also learn from them. And so I networked with two or three executive directors, I think, at that time, project leads, head of chemistry, these kind of roles. And they gave me a couple of pointers. One was, PhD, very, very important if you want to move up in the pharma industry. And the other side of it was I made a good connection with one of the kind of heads of chemistry there, who ultimately then moved to the Institute of Cancer Research. And when I was ready to finish my PhD and look at options at that point, I remembered him, and I thought, let me connect and see what's happening at the Institute of Cancer Research. I had an interest in oncology, and interestingly, the interest was not so much from the treatment of the disease, but actually, while in the lab, I would be working with some very dangerous chemicals. All a lot of them would have that warning, this may cause cancer. And at that time, I used to be quite stressed about that, and that prompted me to read up a lot about cancer. I'm quite fortunate that at that stage I wasn't impacted personally by cancer, though I know a lot of people are, unfortunately. But yeah, fell into that conversation again, and was able to get that postdoc at the Institute of Cancer Research, and I've never stopped being in oncology since. So 15 years plus.
That's a wonderful career trajectory, Sav. And Sav, behind every scientist and leader is a story, moments, mentors, and even setbacks that shape how they see the world. And over the course of your journey, what personal experiences have most profoundly shaped your approach to oncology and the way you think about cancer research and development?
As you mentioned earlier, oncology is an incredibly complex area. No one can say they master oncology even after 40, 50-year career. If you can master one disease, one cancer, or one subset of cancer, that'd be incredible. So what I learned very early on in my career was the value of really listening to mentors, listening to even managers. And I can think already of some of those mentors I had very early in my career, which really shaped the way that I looked at oncology. And I happened to join at a time when we started to have the first targeted therapies coming through, and the next wave of development was happening with the small molecule TKIs, driver mutation therapies, obviously the kind of the immuno-oncology kind of era as well. So in that kind of heyday of a lot of things happening, it was very important to have those mentors to kind of make sure you're focusing in the right places and not being afraid to kind of explore new ideas. And I think I've kind of hold on to that throughout my career, and made a lot of moves in my career based on that.
Right. And would you like to give a shout out to some of your mentors?
Yeah, I mean, Rachel Webster at Decision Resources Group. Yeah, she was my mentor when I was an oncology analyst. My first, let's say, kind of more commercial role. And I kind of learned a lot about the background of cancer diseases, but how to have really in-depth conversations with KOLs, with the experts, how to turn those insights into actionable strategies that pharma companies and biotech companies could use. Also, my postdoc supervisor, Sven Holder, as well at the Institute of Cancer Research, the way into oncology, which I've been thankful for him to giving me that chance and kind of developing ever since.
Sav, cancer care today looks very different than it did 20 years ago. We've gone from chemotherapy being the standard to immunotherapies, targeted treatments, and now precision medicine becoming part of everyday practice. From your vantage point, what shifts in the field of oncology have left the biggest impression on you? And whether from a people, patient, or policy perspective?
The technology throughout the last 15 years of my career, it's just incredible how we've moved almost in waves of technological advances. As I mentioned, you had the monoclonal antibody phase. Well, obviously the original, the kind of chemotherapy, radiotherapy phase of several decades ago, obviously surgery as well, then to more targeted treatments, monoclonal antibodies, small molecule targeted therapies, understanding, of course, the kind of genetic causes and kind of drivers of cancer, and understanding the heterogeneity of different cancers has been important. Now we're moving well in the era of the immuno-oncology molecules. We're moving now to antibody drug conjugates, T-cell engagers, utilizing the immune system in better and better ways in order to get more durable outcomes for patients. So that's on the science and on the science side. Of course, you mentioned in terms of advocacy from the patient perspective, and that's always been there. But of course, that the kind of visibility of cancer ever grows. And it reminds me of a conversation I had in preparation to getting this haircut and looking neat and tidy for your podcast with my barber. And it's often the case, right? You have a conversation with, let's say, a stranger or someone, very little, and they'll ask you, what do you do for a living? And, cancer research is my normal first response. And that will often open up, some questions from the person you're speaking with. And the obvious first question is, why are so many people being diagnosed with cancer? Yeah. Everyone seems to be getting cancer these days, will be kind of the first question. And you'll also get a question like, why can't we find a cure for cancer? Why is it so hard to find a cure? And then most, let's say, worryingly or depressingly for someone who works in the industry will be, is farmers holding, keeping back the cure for cancer? So these questions are always there. But, looking at the first question around the kind of growth rate of some diseases, unfortunately, colorectal cancer, for example, you're getting more and more patients, unfortunately, being diagnosed with that disease, earlier age as well. That pressure is on. It's relentless for us to keep working towards finding new solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're spot on. I think the people who are not closely associated with life sciences or pharmaceutical industry tend to have slightly distorted perception about the industry, and it's about the reputation of the industry. And I understand when people come up with those sort of questions, and they somehow feel that the industry is trying to hide the cure, which is just sad. And some people say that the biggest breakthroughs in oncology aren't just scientific, they are cultural. They are about how we think about patients and how we deliver care and how we talk about cancer itself. So, looking back at your career, what would you say has been the single most meaningful advancement you have witnessed?
I think making new medicines for cancer is incredibly difficult. I mean, you only need to look at the statistics. Only 5% of investigational medicines make it to the hands of doctors in normal everyday hospitals. So on the market, let's say. So there's a huge attrition of going from idea to actual kind of product, and so that requires great people. Ultimately, it requires people with good ideas, but also people that know how to do things. So kind of people that can kind of produce results efficiently, and it also requires collaborations externally. So a pharma company or an academic university can't develop these things in a silo. You need to collaborate. And I think one of the learnings over the last 20 years, at least since I've been in this space, is the amount of medicines. If you look at their history, how many hands they've changed through. Maybe started the life in a lab in a university, then moved to a small biotech, then ended up with a big pharma, or even some molecules that started life with a big pharma and were out licensed, ended up in the hands of a biotech that was able to
Yeah.
find a new use for them. So without having that collaborative atmosphere, and I think that's continuing to improve as well as we bring tech companies into the mix as well, is what's really driving this kind of wave of optimism that
Right.
we can continue to make dents for patients against this deadly disease.
Absolutely. And I think for someone like me with a very shallow knowledge of oncology and cancer research, I think what I find fascinating is the evolution of immunotherapy and how we can use our own immune system to fight cancer, and as opposed to using radiation or chemotherapy. And I understand sometimes you require a combination of these different approaches to tackle different aspects of cancer, including surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. But I think the power of immunotherapy is so fascinating.
Yeah, it is, and I think the history of it has been very fascinating. I mean, I'm not an immunologist, so I'm not going to go into too much depth. Interestingly, my first role, as I mentioned earlier, when I was an oncology analyst, it was really just about the time when the first immunotherapy had been approved in oncology. I think it's back in 2011, and I remember looking at some forums at that time,
Right.
some patient forums actually, and it was actually I was a melanoma analyst, so I was looking at some melanoma patient forums, and these patients were talking about this new, my oncologist has recommended me for me to go on this trial for something called a PD-1,
Mm,
and this was across quite a few posts. I remember at the time, and these drugs at that time were in phase 1, so very very early, almost first in human type studies. And I looked into it, and we started discussing with KOLs and experts in the field, and really it was quite a dramatic, speedy kind of development from there, and these drugs were on the market within 3 years after that. And that's the kind of impact that they've had has been incredible. Now we're moving to the next wave. I mean, we've tried to look at combinations, as you mentioned, combinations of immunotherapies with chemotherapy or with radiotherapy, etc. The next wave of innovation is combining with antibody drug conjugates, ADCs, and also T cell engagers, which are again relatively new. We do have some T cell engagers which are now available for patients, but that's another way of utilizing the immune system by recruiting T cells, bringing the T cells into the tumor microenvironment in a way that can then, allow some patients who currently can't benefit from immunotherapies because they just don't have the required kind of tumor microenvironment from an immune perspective to now benefit, because the medicine is designed to actually pull the T cells into the tumor
right.
to activate and then destroy the tumor. So really exciting times,
Right.
and we've only just started understanding how these molecules work and how we can best use them.
Right. And for the sake of my understanding, could you simplify the concept of T cell engagers, or what do you?
Ages, yeah, sure.
All right.
So think of them almost as two monoclonal antibodies in one.
Mm-hmm.
So monoclonal antibody will typically bind to a specific target. The famous ones are things like HER2,
Mm-hmm.
where you bind and block HER2, and that provides an anti-cancer or anti-tumor effect, and has really good efficacy for patients with tumors that are driven by
Right.
that HER2 expression. With a T cell engager, you still maintain that targeting of an antigen, so a target which is expressed heavily in a cancer. Now you want ideally expressed in the cancer, but not expressed in healthy tissue. So you're
Okay.
binding to the T cell, you're binding to the tumor presenting cell, and you're then kind of bringing the two things together in a way which is not achievable through a single monoclonal antibody.
Right. Oh, that's very well explained, and thank you so much for explaining this. I was actually recently interacting with some of our audience, and somebody said to me, a student said to me that your content is amazing, but you use a lot of technical words. After a few minutes, I just switch off. So I realized how important it is to make science accessible for people who may not necessarily come from a scientific background but are interested in learning. And I think the way you simplified this concept was really very helpful.
I completely agree with you. I mean, communication
Yeah,
is half the battle in science. So I'd say even more than half the battle. If
yeah,
There are a lot of very, very good scientists out there. The ones that really rise to the top are the ones that can communicate the science in a way that it's understandable, not only for experts, but also for the layman. And I think, these concepts, I'm glad you kind of asked me that question, and happy to clarify other aspects as well as we discuss. But yeah, and the way I look at it, if you can explain it to a GCSE student,
Yes.
you can explain to anyone. And I was explaining how a T-cell engager works to my nephew a few weeks ago. And so if you can get to that level of
Clarity.
clarity,
Yeah.
well, that's what you need to do in order to really be able to again, bring people into the fold, that can help you. Not everyone needs to be well-versed in the science. So you can have people that are the experts in the tech
Mm.
side, and they need to be able to understand what you're trying to achieve in order to be able to help you in different ways.
And Sav, in a world where innovation moves faster than ever, where AI, biomarkers, and genetic insights dominate the conversation, it can be easy to lose sight of what actually matters to patients. How do you personally stay focused on what's most important for them? All right.
Yeah, it's incredibly important, Koshik. I mean, one side is the science and what we're developing. And the more important part is the benefit it can give to patients. And we're not talking about just, and I say just, but we're not, the most important thing, of course, is giving people time, patients time,
Mm.
extending lives, hopefully curing patients. But there's lots of other aspects of a medicine which can be very impactful to patients. The tolerability profile, how they manage taking their treatment. Do they need to travel a long distance in order to get it? Can they receive it in a more closer place? Can they take it from home? What are the requirements pre and post medication? So in order to understand the impact these things can have on a patient, it's very important to speak to them, either through doing some kind of dedicated discussions with patients or informally. I think everyone who works in oncology also, of course, has family, friends, and unfortunately, many of them are impacted by cancer, by either going through treatment journeys or have been through treatment journeys or seeing their loved ones go through treatment journeys. So listening to them, listening to their perspectives, their experiences is incredibly important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. And talking about opportunities and innovation, we are in an era where data is power. Precision medicine, AI, and real world evidence are redefining what's possible for cancer patients. Where do you see the greatest opportunities for these tools to actually move the needle on outcomes?
I think we're still in the infancy of the era, Kushik. So it's difficult to see where it's going to go. I mean, I think it could go in many directions, and that's exciting. We're starting to pick at the power of some of these tools, utilizing it in drug discovery to understand novel targets, to almost virtually develop molecules
Mm.
and to kind of fine tune and optimize these molecules before moving to the, let's say, the wet bench and creating molecules. We're still waiting for those huge breakthroughs that have come through from AI. I do not doubt that they will come soon. And then to your point, the biggest impact will be with the rich amount of data that we generate. Patient level clinical data, but also the genetic biomarker data that we have in our hands. Yep.
So, Sav, one of the criticisms often leveled at our industry is that while innovation is happening, it doesn't always reach patients fast enough. And that all is because of the delays in the clinical trial process. Do you believe pharma is moving quickly enough in adopting patient centric approaches to cancer treatment?
I think we could think the industry can always do better. I think there are definitely barriers still, even in this modern age of data and availability of information, for patients to really fully understand what options are out there from a clinical trial perspective. And you only have to go onto websites like clinicaltrials.gov, for example, which is probably the premier kind of website for understanding about clinical trials. And as a patient, you can, if you put your patient lens on and review that, it's very complicated to find information about what trials are out there. You're heavily reliant on your specialist, your oncologist or hematologist, in order to help you access some of these studies. So I think there still is a gap for us to continue to develop easier to understand ways for patients to really understand what options are out there, but then also continuing to work with the trial sites to provide them with the right type of communication, so that we can make sure that patients are able to access studies globally.
Right. So, talking about barriers and challenges, for all the progress we have made, developing cancer medicines is still one of the most difficult things in science. Like you said, it can take about 10 to 15 years and billions of dollars to bring a drug from concept to market. And despite the progress, what systemic or structural barriers do you think still hold us back in oncology drug development?
Yeah, it's an incredibly difficult process, and there's a lot of attrition that happens from the bench to get to the real world with patients. I think with oncology or cancer, anti-cancer treatments, one thing is understanding the science at the preclinical level, and I think we're getting better at predicting how in vitro and in vivo experiments could potentially translate into the clinic. But there's still a big gap, right? You can do as many experiments as you want preclinically until you've done your first phase 1 clinical study, or even beyond into dose expansion, when you're able to really have a significant number of patients who have been trialed on that medicine. You just don't understand, you just don't know how things are going to respond, how the tumor is going to respond. And so what we're trying to do really is to utilize other translational models to help improve the probability of making it from the bench to the market. Models such as organoid models, which use real patient tissue in order to more optimally look at the potential outcomes or response activity that a new medicine can have, in order to, again, pick out maybe potentially new biomarkers that we could use for patient selection, or to optimize combinations or dosing, etc. So that's the next wave, and I'm hoping that's going to improve the probability of making it to the market. But as you mentioned, cancer is incredibly complex. Within any given cancer, you've got some non-small cell lung cancer, for example, potentially 100 different forms of non-small cell lung cancer with different driver mutations or genomic alterations, which are leading to the growth of that tumor. And so, unfortunately, that as my barber asked, that kind of single cure for cancer, it's just not going to be possible, unfortunately. Yeah, and we hope that through the investment of our minds, and also, of course, financial, that we continue to make progress in tackling this step by step and segment by segment.
How do you think from concept to market the pipeline progresses? And out of, let's say, 10 concepts, how many of those actually make it to the market? Or maybe I may have to expand the number there. Maybe out of 100.
Yeah, so about five
Yeah.
make it through regulatory approval. So you need to have multiple shots on goal, let's say, multiple approaches in order to get to that one molecule that works. That's why we have to invest a lot of finance behind the development of these molecules. So anything we can do to improve that hit rate. So can we improve that 5% by making sure we're going for the right targets, with the right modalities, with the right types of approaches. So like I mentioned earlier, your antibody drug conjugate versus your small molecule versus your T-cell engager, and the speed at which we can do that. And that's where we really hope AI, ML, we hope by being more efficient with the way that we pull together these plans, that we'll be able to get those molecules from the lab to the clinic as quick as possible, so that we can see whether they are going to show any promise for patients as early as possible, so that we can then reinvest and make sure we're developing and looking at the approaches that have the best chance of success.
And Sav, if we were to fast forward 10 years, cancer treatment could look radically different, from blood tests that detect cancer early to cell gene therapies that change the way we think about cure. What would an ideal, more evolved oncology landscape look like to you?
Yeah, I think we're at in that era of having a luxury of different ways to tackle the treatment of cancer. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got new modalities and new mechanisms of creation of medicines, and or the way that these medicines work. So antibodies, small molecules, T-cell engagers, etc. So where we're at now is understanding how can we combine these aspects or these types of modalities. They all come with their own strengths and weaknesses, or opportunities and challenges, let's say. It could be from a tolerability perspective. So it's kind of balancing how can you get the most efficacy through combining these therapies, with also balancing what is truly tolerable for a patient. And again, going back to our discussion earlier about what the patient's voice in the matter. It's no good us pulling together a regimen of 6 or 7 different medicines combined together if that's going to create a cumulative effect, which makes quality of life completely very difficult or very hard for patients. So it's that balance combined with precision medicine, and precision medicine has been around for decades now. We're still learning how we can best select treatment for a certain patient based on their genetic or other profile. And we hope that AI/ML can help us efficiently understand patient tissue data, utilize that to understand which biomarkers or selection criteria those patients are more likely for response for those patients. So yeah, we continue to learn, and yeah, I'm hoping that this kind of mix of options will ultimately allow us to really continue to improve survival for patients.
Sav, no one organization can do this alone. Academia, industry, regulators, patient groups all play a role in moving the needle. From your perspective, what kind of collaborations will be most critical to accelerating meaningful progress in oncology?
I think, as we've been discussing, the role of tech, AI, ML, and other methods to really utilize data, patient level data, is going to be incredibly important. So collaboration between healthcare systems, governments, academia, pharma, biotech companies, and tech companies in order to utilize that data is going to be important in order to discover those new targets, to discover kind of new models for development. We know now that China is, of course, progressing very rapidly
Yes.
when it comes to drug discovery and development, very efficiently. So partnering with companies overseas, partnering with universities that are developing new approaches to tackling these challenges is going to be incredibly important.
And Sav, there are many people listening to this who are just starting out, people who want to build a career at the intersection of science, strategy, and leadership. From everything you've learned, what advice would you give to them?
Well, three things. One is to network. I think that is critical. And I gave you the example earlier. I'm still to this day networking as I mean, it doesn't come natural to me. I'm not naturally an introvert. So getting out there and speaking to people face to face, etc., take some effort. But nowadays, you can do a lot of that through LinkedIn. You can do a lot of that through Teams meetings. I was one of those people that really enjoyed COVID because didn't need to get into the hustle and bustle of a busy office environment. So that networking is key. I think building on that is learning from people's journeys. So look at how, even I sometimes just browse people's profiles and see, okay, this person started here and now they've ended up here. What were those points in their journey that really ended up as being pivot points? And how do they utilize those experiences? And I'm one of those people as well that's kind of moved through a lot of companies, through a lot of different functions and types of roles. And so understanding that each role can give you one piece of the puzzle in order to get to the next role, but also you're building the bigger picture. And so now I feel more comfortable having had that commercial experience, having had experience on the agency consulting side, the kind of outside perspective of the industry, and now moving into the industry, having done a variety of roles across local, global, commercial, strategy, R&D, has been important. And then the third thing is, keeping up to date with what's happening in the world, even outside of your line of sight. So, AI/ML. I was one of those people that, kind of, let's say a year ago, was unsure of the value or the power this was going to bring. And I've been speaking to some of my software kind of engineer friends and other IT friends, and understanding that actually we need to really be on top of the tech side of things. If we don't understand the technology and how that can impact all industries, then you're going to be left behind. So it's really making sure that you're using your chat GBTs, almost on a daily, definitely on a daily basis, but on an hourly basis, using the resources that your companies have access to a lot of their own AI models now. I use them on a very, very regular basis to make my work more efficient, but also to help drive these projects forward and make sure that we're getting those different perspectives into the project.
Right. And finally, Sav, when you look back across your career, through all the challenges, the breakthroughs, what's the one belief or principle that has guided you through every role you've taken?
It's being humble, I think, is the first thing. So going into a role and recognizing that, number one, you won't know it. You won't know it all because you're new. But number two, being honest with people about what you know and what you don't know. So moving into any new role, if you're not honest, you're going to stumble. And so I'm one of those people that is very happy to ask for help when needed, to pick the brains of experts. And I've actually created a network of 4 or 5, in my mind, are kind of thought leaders for me, who are experts in different aspects of, of work, but also life, really. And, someone's expert in strategy, someone's expert in getting things done, having those different mindsets. And, often when I'm going for a new role, for example, I will bounce ideas off these people to kind of make sure that I'm prepared. I'm prepared for those interviews, prepared for the next steps. So yeah, utilizing those expertise is incredibly important.
Right. Well, and that brings us to the end of our today's conversation, Sav. And what I've taken away from this conversation is that oncology isn't just about the science, it's about people, the patients, the doctors, the teams, and the leaders who dedicate their lives to tackling one of humanity's toughest challenges. Dr. Solanki's career is a reminder that progress is not just measured in molecules or milestones, but in the mindset, resilience, and vision it takes to keep pushing forward. So, Sav, I want to thank you for not just sharing your experiences, but also for the honesty and wisdom you've brought into this conversation. It's been inspiring to hear how you've navigated your own journey in oncology and what the future of cancer care might look like through your eyes. And to everyone listening, I hope this conversation leaves you with as much perspective as it has given me. Because if there's one thing we've learned today, it's that the fight against cancer is about innovation, yes, but above all, it's about people who care deeply enough to make change happen. Sav, thank you once again for joining me on Drug Diaries. It was an absolute pleasure hosting you on the show.
Thank you so much, Kushak. I look forward to speaking with you again, hopefully soon.
Thank you, Sav. Likewise. What I've taken away from this conversation is that oncology isn't just about the science, it's about people, the patients, the doctors, the teams, and the leaders who dedicate their lives to tackling one of humanity's toughest challenges. Dr. Solanki's career is a reminder that progress is not just measured in molecules or milestones, but in the mindset, resilience, and vision it takes to keep pushing forward. Sav, I want to thank you for not just sharing your experiences with us today, but also for the honesty and wisdom you've brought into this conversation. It's been inspiring to hear how you've navigated your own journey in oncology and what the future of cancer care might look like through your eyes. And to everyone listening, I hope this conversation leaves you with as much perspective as it's given me. Because if there's one thing we've learned today, it's that the fight against cancer is about innovation, yes. But above all, it's about people who care deeply enough to make that change happen. Sav, thank you once again for joining me on Drug Diaries. It was an absolute pleasure hosting you on the show.